We've got this insane fever dream by Peter Molyneux with Milo, where it's okay, here's this digital boy that's gonna talk to you like your connect or like through your Kinect. It's basically the next step of Hey You Pikachu coming to life in the reins of a child.
Teaser trailers, screenshots, leaks, gameplay footage, all things that create hype for a hotly anticipated video game. But sometimes the things we get so very excited for don't always come to fruition. We're here to talk about those canceled video games on another exciting episode of A Cast of the Past, where you can catch a brand new episode each and every Sunday on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms. Joining me, of course, Keith Hamilton from London, Ontario.
Hi.
So, Keith, when it comes to canceled games, is there
Yes.
any game in your mind that's a sore spot for you?
I wouldn't say that sore spot is the right word for me in the way that, like, it's one of those things where there's just so many games where it's like, okay, move on to the next one. It kind of sucks for a little bit in an instance where I was excited for something. I guess the first thing that comes to mind would be like a Star Wars 1313, but there are so many other games that came out afterwards that it's like, okay, yeah, it would have been cool if we had it, but next.
Yeah, so we're going to be running through a list of 25 amazing canceled video games we'll never get to play from screenrant.com. But I think
Amazing is a strong word,
Yeah.
considering we've never played them.
Yes, but that's what they titled the article. So
Yeah.
take it up with them.
So I'll go send an angry. I'll be that guy for Screen Rant. Why amazing?
There's just a few that I'll probably touch on before we jump into that. Ones that weren't necessarily mentioned there. No, there's two in particular for me that are definitely a sore spot, and one not so much, but also wasn't mentioned.
So
Um,
this is more like leading on what I talked about a minute ago. Can you help me understand why it's a sore spot? Like, what about it makes it like I'm peeved about this for you for those games without like bringing up like you'll bring them up in a minute, but when it comes to like general, why do you feel that feeling of soreness? I genuinely would
well,
like.
I think it comes from all of these come from a series that I like that was going to get another entry and then it got canceled. So
Okay.
because you love that series, so let's just bring on one, Banjo 3, right? So Rare was with Nintendo. Now there's like mixed information on Banjo 3, but essentially once Rare
Yeah, it's called
was
Nuts
bought,
and Bolts.
yeah, once Rare was bought by Microsoft, a lot of things changed, including the team. And instead of the traditional Banjo 3 platform, we get Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Now, I ranted on this in our worst sequels video, and I know Keith likes Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. We won't re-enter that whole conversation,
Hmm.
but it did
But it's a
seem
good
like,
game. I'm right.
yeah, it did seem like it was heavily implied, because even at the end of Banjo-Tooie, Gruntilda mentions like see you in Banjo 3E, which is a terrible name, but regardless, it was hotly anticipated that this was going to be a GameCube entry. Now, another game that was actually canceled that I specifically remember seeing on the back of the GameCube box when I bought it was a game called Donkey Kong Racing. And even though that's not like, this one is not by any means a sore spot for me, I remember, I love the Donkey Kong Country series, and Rare was the one who created it. And I just remember seeing that on the back of the box. And then years and years later, I was just kind of like, hey, whatever happened to that game? It never came out, but obviously that was due to, Rare buying Microsoft and all that jazz. So there's a lot of those games. It's really fun to particularly look back at, especially E3, and like
Yeah.
watch these presentations, and then you're just like, that game never came out.
Yeah,
What's
that's
the
where
deal
I
with
get
that?
my fun from this, because it's not really a feeling of disappointment or anger that we never got it, but it's fascinating to go back and look at these things, and especially if it's something that was highly anticipated, just how much hype there was for it just for something to never happen.
Exactly. And now, something we can bring up that Keith mentioned just before we even hit the record button was this Project Milo, is what
Speaking
they
of
were
dumb
calling it.
hype,
Yeah, so this was a thing they were hyping up Microsoft Kinect when the Wii was just taking over
yeah,
the world.
back when
Xbox
it was still
360,
Project Natal.
yes. Back when Wii was taking over the world, Xbox 360, PS3, they were like, we got to get on the motion controls thing. So Xbox was like, hey, we got Kinect, no controllers needed. And then they had this demo with
You are the
Project
controller.
Milo. Yes, Project Milo, where it shows this woman talking to a boy, and the basically some of the stuff that they pull in this demo, the Kinect really isn't even that capable of doing, I'm pretty sure. Like at one point I think she hands him like a piece of paper or something, and then he like receives it through the screen, when really at the end of the day wasn't the Kinect, it was really just kind of like picking up on movement. It wasn't exactly like snapshotting a piece of paper or something. I don't know.
No, well, it was weird because it came from that initial Connect tech demo where it was like talking about the promise of Connect and like, oh, if you want to play a skateboarding game, you can hold a skateboard up to the Connect and it'll scan your deck into it. And then it showed gameplay of like somebody trying to move their leg and then the thing totally bugging out 30 seconds later. And then it was kind of this like up and down of that thing, and at the end, we've got this insane fever dream by Peter Molyneux with Milo, where it's okay, here's this digital boy that's going to talk to you like your connect or like through your connect. It's basically the next step of Hey You Pikachu coming to life in the reins of a child. And then it's this, yeah, like
It
you said, this weird fever dream where you're like, okay, Milo, time to go do your homework, and then he'll go run off and like say I don't want to do my homework, and then it's basically like this weird parenting simulator, it almost seemed like. And boy, I can't imagine why that thing never came out.
Isn't like Peter Molyneux just the king of false promises when
Yeah,
it comes to video games?
he is the used car salesman of video games.
Yeah, I remember he would always hype up all these things in Fable, and then half of them just never came to fruition. But yeah, it definitely was what we got at the end of the day for the Kinect was not even capable, I think, of doing most of the things in that demo, aside
No.
from maybe the talking back to Milo. And I don't know if it would have really made for much of a game anyway. But yeah, that's just one of those things that at the end of
I
the
mean,
day,
it
you're like,
didn't work
hey,
when they tried it with Seaman. They didn't
yeah,
work when they tried it with Hey You Pikachu.
yeah,
Shout
it
out to
just it
Seaman.
it just may not make for an interesting game. A quick one I want to bring up that we actually brought up back on our No Mercy episode, and feel free to check that out on the archives. It was WWF Backlash, which was supposed to be the true successor to WWF No Mercy, which is considered one of the best wrestling games ever. So there's not too much info from what I can recall, but
Yeah, there was only just a couple of screenshots that came out there of that game, and it sucks that we don't get it, but it's just a matter of we know so little about it.
yeah, and it's unfortunate because there was, the gameplay we saw eventually, it was turned into Def Jam Vendetta, and which was a great game in and of itself. But it is sad we never got to see that true evolution of a WWF game, from No
You might
Mercy
say
to
it
Backlash.
remains a mystery,
Yes, to this very
much
day.
like evolution.
Oh boy, oh boy.
Sorry, I'm in a mood this
Yeah,
episode.
seriously. I don't know what's going on. But all right, let's dive into this list of 25 amazing canceled video games that we'll never get to play.
All right.
All right, starting at 25, here's another personal one for me. Silent Hills, right? The
Yeah,
PT
I've
demo.
never heard of that until right now.
Wait,
That's
Silent
interesting.
Hills?
Yeah, Silent Hills.
Really? So
Yeah,
wait, you
like
didn't, like PT, the
yeah.
demo? That was supposed to be the next Silent Hill game. Did you
Oh,
not know that?
I never realized it had a name outside of PT. I didn't know that they named it Silent Hills plural. Oh, okay. Well, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I
so
know it was going to be a Silent Hill game. I
oh,
just didn't
okay.
realize it got a title.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was going to be called Silent Hills.
Okay.
Anyway, PT was this demo that really blew everyone away on what I mean for a demo. It's like up there. I think it's been on lists of like best games of the decade and things like that,
Which
which
is
is
insane.
yeah, which is crazy because it is straight up just a demo. But what it did was so innovative and really was a awesome kind of next gen version of a horror game, and was a really interesting direction that they were taking the game. And of course, the Norman Reedus, his model ended up just being repurposed for Death Stranding, but originally that character model in Death Stranding was supposed to be for this game, Silent Hills, which was going to have Kojima behind it and Guillermo del Toro. So there was so much hype. And I think to me, it's number 25 on this list, but I feel like this has to be up there for a lot of people because people saw the potential for Silent Hills. And
I
then
think it's
for things to get
definitely
in the
the
way and for it to
most
get canceled really sucks.
yeah, it's definitely the most critically acclaimed canceled game ever.
It's absolutely up there. Um, so moving on, Star Wars 1313. So this was going to be a third-person shooter that would throw players into the shoes of a young Boba Fett as he begins his bounty hunting career. The game would be set in the seedy, crime-ridden depths of Coruscant level 1313. The gameplay trailer blew fans' minds. Upon release, it had the cinematic action of an Uncharted game painted in dark, gritty take on Star Wars. How the game would never make its release.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I remember watching and going like, wow, that looks like a really cool Star Wars thing. I'm excited to check that out. But there's just so many other Star Wars things that came out, not all of them good, admittedly, that it
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like, oh, okay, well, it sucks that we didn't get it, but all right, moving on.
Yeah, I mean, I like it, especially with Mandalorian coming out. I think there's like a new interest in like
Mhm.
the bounty hunter aspect of
I'm
Star Wars.
I'm all about the stories in Star Wars that aren't focused around like the
The
entire
Jedi and
galaxy is at stake or at stake
like
and the Jedi and the Skywalkers. Like my favorite stories are just like here's a dude hanging out on level
smaller
1313 of
scale
Coruscant.
stories within the Star Wars universe. Yeah, I
Exactly.
can
Then
appreciate that because we've gotten so much of that it's nice to see a different take and to show that Star Wars is more than just the Jedi and the Empire.
let's be real. Like if we're talking about like universes that it would be awful to live in, Star Wars has to be up there. Like everything in that entire universe
Yeah,
sucks.
unless you are like someone high up in the Empire or high or like the Jedi, the Resistance, whatever,
It
your
doesn't
life
matter
kind
where
of
you live,
sucks.
your life is miserable. You're either on the crappy sand planet or the snow planet or the crime planet or the drug planet or the lava planet. There's no reprieve.
Pretty much. Moving on, we've got here's a really cool one that I had no idea. Gotham by Gaslight. I don't know if you've ever heard of this one,
I've never
but
heard of that one either.
apparently this is based off of a comic, but it would basically be during the era of like Jack the Ripper. So it would be like vaguely steampunk England.
Okay.
I don't know what time period Jack the Ripper. I want to say like 1800s or sooner or whatever, but basically it would be
Wasn't it
pre-
like around 1918? I'm judging
uh,
that off of Finn Balor's wrestling moveset.
okay. Well, we could go by that. But essentially, it's like Batman in like the past, like the Jack the Ripper era in England. and I thought it was pretty cool.
That's a cool
Like I said,
concept.
there is a comic book um, that is called Gotham by Gaslight, I guess, and I think this would be an interesting take on Batman to do a more old school. They'd have to be a little bit more clever with the gadgets and stuff like that. So, do you get like a horse and buggy instead of the Batmobile? Who knows?
Robin's just a horse.
Yeah, just call the horse Robin. I like that. I've never seen this movie, but it's obviously classic. Dirty Harry, the video game, was apparently something that was supposed to come out with, obviously based off of Clint Eastwood's popular movie.
Mhm.
Could have been cool.
Could have been, but I will also point you in the direction of about 100 other crappy movie video
Yeah,
games. So
yeah. I mean, there
if
were people. Some people like the Scarface video game. I've never played it, but I don't
I
know.
mean, yeah, it's all right, but you could also use that time to just play Grand Theft Auto Vice City, which is
Yeah,
a
which is
better
just
one
a
of
better
those.
version. Yeah. Next, here's one that we're definitely familiar with, and that's Project Titan. So both of
Oh,
us being
yes.
fans of Blizzard, Project Titan was a thing we heard about for a long time.
Oh, it's so
It
long.
was it was always like, oh wow, is WoW dying? Well, hey, Project Titan's coming out. Around like Cataclysm era and Mists of Pandaria. I think there was a lot of talk about Project Titan. So this was in like the early 2010s.
Because it was
Um,
supposed to be another MMO made by
yeah,
Blizzard.
so people were like, "Oh, is Project Titan is that like WoW 2, World of Warcraft 2 where they use a new engine and all this stuff?" And what eventually happened was they canceled Project Titan and some of the stuff kind of got repurposed and reworked, and that's eventually what we came to know as Overwatch. But what Overwatch is very different than what Project Titan was supposed to be. It was basically supposed to be an MMO where you kind of live your daily life as a more regular person, but then there's like this espionage warfare at night. But apparently, Blizzard, they just couldn't get the concept to work as like a fun and interesting game, so it eventually just got canceled.
I give a lot of credit to Blizzard as they are probably the most notorious studio of if something does not work, they are willing to just
Yeah,
throw it in a
it
garbage
it took a
can.
lot of balls to just throw it in the trash can. At least they got to reuse some of it for Overwatch, but for as long as they spent on that game, it does kind of suck. It must suck for them to have it never see the light of day.
Absolutely.
Next, we have Daredevil, the Man Without Fear. Maybe Juan would have cared about this because he was a big fan of
Wow,
Daredevil.
that's
But for
a
me,
deep cut right there.
yeah, for me, I'm just like, don't really care about. Uh,
Again, much like movie games, I will point you in the direction of 100 crappy superhero games.
Pretty much. Agent. So, Grand Theft Auto developer Rockstar Games had seemingly abandoned Agent, an open world stealth game
Oh,
steeped in the world of
right.
spies and espionage. There's a common trait with these spies and espionage games getting canceled.
It's
Uh,
almost like it's a hard thing to make fun.
Yeah, I
Slow
remember hearing a
gameplay.
lot about this. I remember Juan way back in the day actually hyping me up about this game, and how it was gonna have like cross-gen multiplayer and things like that, whatever, all this stuff. And I remember hearing about it for years and years, and then it was kind of one of those, hey, whatever happened to that? And it was canceled.
hmm It went in the garbage can. That's what happened.
Speaking of superhero games, there was going to be Flash, the fastest man alive. Oh boy, it seems like we really missed out on that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna lose some sleep over that one. Jesus, I'm not shocked that didn't come out. Even just the concept of that doesn't seem like something I'd want to play.
I'm noticing a trend here. We're getting a lot of Star Wars and superhero games because this
So,
next one, Battle of the Sith Lords.
sorry, I need to go back for a minute.
Okay, what do you
Would
get?
would the Flash video game be the ultimate speedrunning game?
Ooh, that is a terrible pun. You're the worst. Anyway, Battle of the Sith Lords. Here's another great idea left behind by Disney's acquisition, apparently. Took
Yeah, no, I don't know
inspiration
anything
from
about this
Arkham
one.
Asylums, framing Maul as both the expert swordsman and deadly predator stalking from the shadows. Wait, you're going to play as Darth Maul in this game?
That's
Okay,
interesting.
that would have been pretty cool. So, like, Arkham Asylum, but playing as Darth Maul, that actually would have been pretty cool.
Those are two things I like and could have been very cool.
Yeah. Well, R.I.P.
Yeah.
Sith
I'm actually a
Lords.
little bummed out about that one. I wonder if there's any footage of that out there. I'm gonna have to look at that
You're
after this
just gonna make
episode.
yourself sad, Keith.
Oh
You know.
well, sometimes you need a little sadness in your life. Kind of like that Flash video game. Just needs to be sad.
StarCraft Ghost. Now, I'm not a big StarCraft guy. All the only thing I remember about StarCraft Ghost is I'm pretty sure there's an area in World of Warcraft where they had like a tribute to this game getting canceled.
Because
Um,
this was a first-person shooter in the
yeah, in the
StarCraft universe
StarCraft
where
universe.
you play as a ghost, which is a Terran unit.
Yeah, I know nothing about StarCraft, but I know it's a Blizzard thing. But it would have been cool because StarCraft, obviously, it's a real-time strategy game, but they haven't really gotten anything, in another style of game. So it could have been interesting, but didn't
Hmm,
end up making it. Moving along, we got Mega Man Universe. Not sure too much on this game,
that's
but
another one I've never heard
yeah.
anything about, honestly.
Moving on, we got Scalebound. This Xbox One. It was an Xbox One exclusive. It's got a big dragon in it, and I guess it didn't end up. you, Players would team up with the dragon to go on various fantasy adventures. Looks like that just never ended up happening.
That's another one. Like, are these games all have like, do they all have like footage behind them? Because some of these I just had no idea that they
Yeah,
exist.
I think some of them do a lot. This article is providing screenshots. I know you can't see. For those seeing the video version, there is screenshots of every game. Some of them are just concept art, like Agent. There was never any gameplay footage, things like that.
Hmm.
Moving along, we got Marvel Chaos, which another superhero game. But hey, there's a new Marvel game, so it's not really
Wasn't
a
this
big
one
deal.
supposed to be a fighting game, if I remember correctly?
Let me see. Marvel Chaos intended to be, yeah, it was an authentic Marvel Comics fighting game by the now defunct studio Electronic Arts Chicago.
Okay.
Doom 4. I don't really know much about the Doom series. So, Doom 4 was announced back in 2008, was initially designed as a cinematic take on the franchise with an emphasis on story. The game would have taken place on Earth, and early footage drew comparisons to other big budget first person shooters at the time, like Call of Duty. Sadly, though, despite the polished gameplay, early builds of the game felt too generic to move forward with.
That's interesting because you mentioned it was 2008, right?
Yeah.
Because I guess parts of this game eventually came out in the Doom reboot in 2016, but that was a game that also showed terribly before it came out. It was very like bland and gray and pastel and didn't wasn't that exciting to look at. So it's almost like they did even 8 years later, they still didn't learn their lesson with Doom up until Doom actually came out, and it turns out it was awesome.
Justice League Justice League Immortal.
Not
So
immortal.
yeah. And so that was it was supposed to be a time whatever third person brawler that featured the members of the Justice League fighting waves of DC rogues as well as each other, complete with individualized combos and movesets. Was well in
Oh.
development before it was canceled, suffering the same fate as its film counterpart.
It sounds like their answer to Marvel Ultimate Alliance, which, hey, guess what? Most things that DC do, DC does, not that DC do, just don't hang.
So here's an interesting one. LMNO. Steven Spielberg's ambitious foray into the video game world was not a successful one, but many are still intrigued. The famous director wanted to create an emotional game experience that he felt the industry was lacking. LMNO was designed to be both interactive and deeply moving. Was a first-person action game that would have the player travel with Eve, an alien seeking refuge from an organization that wants to capture her. The player would learn about Eve and bond with her over time while protecting her from evil forces. While concept footage seemed promising, publisher Electronic Arts deemed it a little too ambitious and ended up pulling the plug.
Interesting. That's another one I didn't know existed,
Yeah,
but
that
that's
that
cool.
actually one it looked pretty cool. It's just
So instead, we
unfortunate.
got Steven Spielberg's foray into video games in Boom Blocks for the Wii.
Yeah, I don't even get that one,
No,
but
I don't
it's a
understand that
thing. It's
either.
apparently a thing that happened. Zone of the Enders 3. I've not played any of the Zone of the Enders. I know that that's a Kojima thing, right?
It is, but it's something I've never touched, which we probably will one day on this podcast because it is quite revered as far as I know. And I do remember like disappointment around the fact that 3 ended up getting cut.
Yeah. There's a game called Fez 2, which looks like a sort of
I
puzzle game
remember
where.
that. Yeah. You've never played Fez?
No.
Fez was a very cool thing over 2 weeks when it first came out of because it's a puzzle game where like it's almost got its own language to it, and there's this amazing time period where the world, like the video game world, was kind of discovering it together and
Hmm.
solving Fez together. And then yeah, the developer Phil Fish, I remember him going a little Andy Kaufman and just kind of disappearing off the face of the earth. And
Wow.
then Fez 2 ended up getting canceled because of it.
Well, that is a different story than most games getting canceled.
Yeah, that one is more of a personality thing than a
Yeah.
budget thing.
Here's an interesting one I never heard about. It's called Sadness. And
I
the
wish you
Wii.
could cancel my sadness.
So the Wii wasn't known for darkness and horror, but that's probably because Sadness was never completed. The game was an extremely ambitious psychological horror story. It would have had a stylish black and white graphics, a branching story with different endings, and a fully interactive environment, and plenty of other highly unique features at the time. So yeah, this one actually looks pretty damn cool. Sorry if you heard that noise. That's my dog.
Pug
Um,
Henry, shout out,
yeah,
Instagram
shout out to
star.
Pug Henry. Um, but there's actually quite a few Wii horror games, more than you'd think, And there's
Yes,
one I
but
recently
there
picked
are a
up.
few. How many good Wii
Yeah,
horror games are there?
there's one I picked up called Curse Mountain that's actually supposed to be pretty decent, so I'm excited to try that out. But this kind of looks like something really cool too, and it's unfortunate. The Wii I'm starting to rediscover and be like, oh, when they try something interesting with the Wii, it's not just shovelware. It actually is more enticing for me to play nowadays, even though I was kind of like not really into the motion control concept back when the Wii was really popular.
Hmm.
Now we got Insane. This is what is the deal with filmmakers of failed video games? Insane was going to be a survival horror game trilogy straight from the mind of Gothic horror director Guillermo. I butchered his name, Del Toro.
It's a
Um,
hard name.
but again, poor Del Toro here. Silent Hills and Insane. He just has horrible
Just a
luck.
bad luck with that,
Um,
or
but
bad follow through. One or the other.
it was canned due to corporate restructuring, and the rights were given to Del Toro himself. Theoretically, the game could return, but it seems to not be the case.
Hmm.
Then we got Prey 2. I remember seeing
I
the trailers
remember
for
you,
this.
Prey too. Yeah,
Yeah.
you were like you are E3 demo that showed well and never came out
Yeah, it
101.
made its way to like every E3. It was stuck in developmental
It
hell
won
for
like
years.
best game awards just to never come out.
Sad, sad story. 6 Days in Fallujah. Let's see. Military games are so common that they are often dismissed, but that's not what happened here. Set out to recreate the Second Battle of Fallujah at the request of Marines who fought there. The game was not intended as a glorification, but as a respectful recounting of the horrors that these soldiers faced. Naturally, the game was subject to media scrutiny due to its subject being such a recent event, with publisher Konami dropping the project for fear of associating with the controversy. While the game had never been officially canceled, it's generations behind in technology and will likely never see a commercial release.
Yeah,
That's definitely a much different story. I guess they maybe got a little too real for some
yeah,
people.
that's a touchy one because it's one of those things where it's cool that they tried it, but it's if you don't land it, like boy, does that not go
Yeah,
well for
you have to
you.
hit
You
the
have
right
to
tone if
be
you're gonna do something like that.
so careful with that. And honestly, just from most video game developers in their attempts to try something like that, I don't feel confident that someone could have pulled that off.
Yeah, no,
No
I
Russian
I
Ryan.
agree. So I know Juan is a big fan of the Time Splitter series, but Time Splitters 4 was supposed to be something that came out, um, and
The
was
first
one of the
three are good.
spiritual
Well, two
successors
and
to
three are
GoldenEye.
good.
Yeah, and So the sequel was announced soon after, but canceled in 2012 due to difficulties marketing the property to game publishers. So just didn't end up working out. And
Maybe
then
one
we
day.
have,
I know Juan would like that.
yeah, that would be more of a sore spot for him, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Star Wars Battlefront 3. So the infamous Battlefront 3 was stuck in developmental hell, and yet even after all these years, it still sounds so appealing. Footage of alpha
It
builds
does.
feature minor differences, but the core concepts remain all the same.
I
But
remember seeing some very cool things from this game because I don't know, did you ever play the PS2 versions of the Star Wars Battlefronts?
I did. I played a little, not a ton, but a
So
little
you
bit.
know how they had like you could choose between ground battle and air battle?
Yeah.
The whole idea of Battlefront 3 was what if you could be on the ground, eventually get into a TIE fighter, and then jump into a space mission?
So
And
kind
that
of
was,
like a Battlefield, but Star Wars.
yeah, exactly, pretty much. And then they had like these, I remember seeing some like what if storylines, and there was this concept of like a Sith Lord, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and that's what they were going to focus on in the story mode, these like what if scenarios in the Star Wars universe. And what they had seemed really cool.
So this would have been the third of like
The
the
original
PS2. Yeah,
Battlefront.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because what we got, I mean, because we did eventually get two new Battlefronts, right?
Hmm.
And I mean, people seem to like them after they fixed all the
Yeah.
loot box
Did
issues
not
and things like
deliver on the promise of Battlefront 3 though.
uh
You can
and
still
that's
not get in a TIE fighter and go to space. You
true.
either are in space or you are in the ground
So
or
yeah,
on
it
them.
definitely justifies why this is on the list because that concept really never came to light. And then number one on the list, another superhero game, The Avengers. So much Star Wars and superheroes. An Avengers first-person shooter.
That's
THQ's The
weird.
Avengers was a four-player cooperative RPG where you could team up as the core Avengers to take on shape-shifting alien race, the Skrulls, which we saw in Captain Marvel. The story
Yes.
was written by comic writing legend Brian Michael Bendis. As a loose adaptation of his own Marvel Comics Secret Invasion, the game would feature characters of the larger Marvel universe as well, including the Fantastic Four and even references of the X-Men. The game was shut down due to its high cost, even though it was nearly complete. According to Did You Know Gaming, one of the only functioning copies of the game belongs to Brian Michael Bendis himself. Ooh,
Ooh,
that's pretty
it
cool.
sounds like this just came out.
Yeah, with that new Marvel
With that
Avengers game.
Avengers game, that was like the second try at that because while it is not a shooter, it is a cooperative game featuring the Avengers. They just took a more
Yeah,
Diablo
this
route
game
with
is
this new
from.
one.
I mean, this article is from 2018, so it's possible that that why maybe it was pieces of it were used. Not
Mhm.
100% sure, so they wouldn't have known about the current Avengers game. But that was the full list of canceled games. So superhero game. If you're a superhero game or you're a Star Wars game in development right now, watch out
Good luck.
because
Nothing is guaranteed in
yeah,
life.
because they're coming for you. They're coming to cancel your game by hook or crook, apparently. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a few on there that were kind of really unfortunate. I think Silent Hills, of course, for me, is personally the most devastating of them.
Yeah.
But I think there is some hope that we're going to be getting a new Silent Hill game in the future from rumors and things like that. But I would say,
Unless you mean a pachinko machine, I
yeah,
wouldn't feel so confident about that
oof.
these days.
Yeah, Konami is not Capcom, and that's the saddest realization, really.
Konami is not a video game company anymore, my friend.
Yeah, it's painful to hear, but maybe there's hope. There's
Yeah,
there,
there's
there's a
there's
little
hope.
bit of hope.
There's
Like I
always
said,
a chance.
there's a few rumors out there. We'll see what happens. We got a whole new generation of
If
systems.
if Bret Hart goes back to the WWE, anything can happen.
It's true. It is true. So to close it out, what would you say on this list is the one game if you could have it come out? What would it be?
Going by the concept art and the development footage that was out there, I would have to go with Battlefront 3 just because of the ideas that it had were so out there, and especially when you consider it being that late PS2 early Xbox era. If that's something that they were able to pull off, it could have been something truly magical, and it could have just been a case of it wasn't actually possible to pull that off. But from what we saw, it's something like had potential to be maybe one of my favorite games ever if it delivered.
Nice. Yeah, that definitely seemed like a really cool one. I haven't played enough Battlefront for it to really get me as excited, and I'm not as big on Star Wars as you. But aside from Silent Hills, because that's just the obvious one for me, the Gotham by Gaslight one actually sounded really really cool.
It's a cool
So
concept.
that would be my number two choice for sure. Just because I feel like there's not, there's a decent amount of games that take place in the past, like a lot of Assassin's Creeds and stuff. But to see like a game like Batman try that kind of concept, I think would be really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but that's gonna do it for this week's conversation. If you want to continue it, definitely head over to our Discord at casttothepast.com/discord. We talk about more than just video games and movies, but also wrestling and food, tons of things like that. A lot of talk about game collecting, things like that.
We can
Um,
talk about our canceled foods. Like I was going to make steak tonight, but then decided not to, so that project has
that
been
is
canceled.
officially canceled. Uh, But yeah, if there's any canceled games that you were really hyped about, you saw at E3 or whatever, it didn't end up coming out, definitely let us know what your top picks are for, the sore spot for you when it comes to games that ended up being canceled. So either leave a comment, send us a tweet at A Cast to the Past, or as I mentioned, continue the conversation over at Discord,
Yeah.
acastthepast.com/Discord. But as of now,
Yep. And the most seamless, smooth transition we've
transition
ever done. It's time to end this episode of a cast.
to the
I
you got to do it this time. I actually let you
did.
close it out. Last time we did some episodes, I did it both times, so I had to
Exactly.
give you a
So
turn.
I had to brute force my way there. So thank you for that transition.